Hi everybody, meteorologist Joe Cioffi here on this Thursday, and a little bit of breaking news here at 4:47 p.m. Eastern Time. We had a magnitude 4.1 earthquake centered near Dover, Delaware. The map that I'm showing you here is from the U.S. Geological Survey. You can go to usgs.gov and check out some more information, but where the star is, that was where the center of this was. And it was felt out in a 300-mile diameter. I didn't feel it here myself, being that I was inside, but we have had reports of it being felt on Long Island, through New York City, all of New Jersey, a good chunk of eastern Pennsylvania. This occurred, by the way, in an area where you've got about 20 million people that live here, from Washington, D.C. to Baltimore to Philadelphia, on up to New York City, and of course the surrounding suburbs of all these cities. So it's not unheard of that you could see earthquakes in this part of the world, but every once in a while they do show up, and they certainly did this time around. So if you want more information on that, go to usgs.gov. And you can not only see the information on that particular earthquake, but as it happened, there were 6 minor earthquakes in the United States today, and there was actually also one in Puerto Rico. While the Earth is doing its thing, we're going to do our thing, which is weather, and we do have those changes that we've been talking about. Very interesting model runs today. With regards to how these changes are going to take place. We still have, a bit of a signal as far as some kind of weather system that could impact the eastern part of the United States around the 8th, 9th, or 10th, or perhaps let's want to give it a window anywhere between, say, the 8th and 9th till through the 10th and 11th. I think that sort of works. And we're going to take you through the runs of the weather models today, which were all, one of the things that we saw today with respect to the weather models is the fact that they're basically the same in terms of what they're pointing to. The devil is in the details. There are differences that show up in terms of the structure in the trough, but we're talking about small scale differences here and not necessarily large ones. The overall theme here for both the Canadian, the GFS and the European. The Canadian's kind of there too, but I'm just lately I just refuse to use it. There's just too much variation, even more so than the other models from run to run, and it gets very difficult to try to make heads or tails out of a model that either is going to make a hurricane out of everything or it's going to make a snowstorm out of everything. So I want to go back one run, because the 2 runs of the GFS today kind of show what is going to be happening here and what could happen as we move through the middle part of next week. So with respect to the rest of this week and this weekend, there really isn't too much going on, just high pressure building in the east, but we do have energy that comes into the west, and you can see snows up into the Rockies and parts of the Pacific Northwest and Northern California for Sunday into Monday. And then as low pressure begins to move across southern Canada, there's going to be a developing cold front. Cold air starts pouring down out of Canada into the northern plains as we move into Tuesday. And then that front gets to the east coast during later Tuesday night, early Wednesday. And you'll notice that there's some snow on the backside. You've got rain ahead of it. And then once the front goes by, temperatures fall. Now, in situations like this, sometimes you can get the rain to change over to some sleet or snow at the very end, but that has to kind of happen perfectly. The models the last several days on both models kind of hinting at the possibility that the front may slow down until the whole upper trough swings to the east coast, and if that happens, you could get a second wave that develops. And that's what the GFS did today, as it forms a wave east of North Carolina and then takes it northeastward, and then northeastward up the coast late next week. Now, the European was kind of hinting at this yesterday as well. This is certainly not impossible, but it is. There is a fair chance that that this may not happen. That it's improbable. The other option, and in terms of this, how the surface shapes up, we'll go to the new GFS run, because that kind of shows you what the other option is here, and that is that the cold air with the cold front, and we'll move you through time. So you see that system that comes into the northwest on Sunday. You get that low that goes up into Canada, up into the western lakes with the trailing cold front, goes to the east coast. Now the other option here is that we see a change over to sleet or wet snow on the backside, at least in places west of the coast, across Pennsylvania, West Virginia, western New York. I think that seems plausible, and maybe that also translates into a change up into eastern Pennsylvania and upstate New York when we get into later next Wednesday as the front goes by. Usually in situations like this, you really don't get a lot out of them, but the other option is that the cold air that comes down, and you can see it here, the dashed blue lines, these are measuring the relative thickness of the atmosphere. The colder the air, the lower the thickness value, and that colder air overwhelms and forces the front to go far to the east, so that if you do get wave development, which you see it here, it's well to the east of the coast. You see the cold air goes all the way down into the Gulf states, into Texas, and down into northern Florida. So this is a pretty solid push of cold air. And as we move through next weekend and beyond, there's another Arctic front with a reinforcing surge and a wave that develops on it. But again, that, at least for now, is shown to be offshore. And then yet another Arctic front with another surge of cold air. Certainly the models imply that we are going to be going into this wintertime pattern, and it's probably going to hang around for a while because of what's happening in the upper atmosphere. So let's take a look at the jet stream pattern and see if we can make heads or tails of what's happening here. And let's put that up. We'll go back to the beginning. Okay, so here up near the poles and up near Greenland, you've got this east-based block that runs from the Atlantic across Greenland and over through the polar regions. So we've got this westerly flow over us. That continues to hold until we get through the weekend, and it's over the weekend and into early next week. You start to see the pressures and heights rise in northeastern Canada and near Greenland, and that forces this big trough, this very deep trough, to develop. And you also have this very, very strong ridge that develops out in the west. And it's doing that, by the way, because if you look near Hawaii and north of Hawaii, you have a deep trough that forms out in the Pacific. So it's basically deep trough responding with strong ridge, deep trough, strong ridge, etc., etc. This is the signature, very high amplitude. And here we are for next Friday. If you follow the lines from the North Pole, our air is actually going to come from the Arctic regions right down through central Canada, right into the eastern, virtually the eastern half of the United States. Everywhere east of the Rockies looks to be cold here, if this is right. The other thing I would point out too is the trough. You know, there are going to be systems, disturbances embedded in that trough that we're not going to be able to see until we get closer to the short range, and they're going to have some impact on the weather. And in fact, when you look here for Friday night, Saturday, there's an upper air disturbance, that a shortwave trough that's swinging around and up northward. So we got to pay attention to these things when a pattern is this dynamic. The models, as they go into the long range, are not going to do a good job in picking out, something that could be a threat. I still believe that while we have this pattern in place, I think we're going to see something on the order of snow at some point. And as we go into the longer range, out right through the 16-day period, you can see that nothing really changes. And by the way, I did also, I've read some of Dr. Judah Cohen's work, and if you don't know who Dr. Judah Cohen is, he's been doing a lot of research with regards to the whole Siberian snow cover theory, and he pays a lot of attention to the stratosphere and what's going on up there and how it translates down to the surface. And one of the things that he said in the last day or so was that the pattern that we were setting up here, people have been throwing out the years 2010, 2011, which showed very strong blocking, but he thinks that what we're doing is setting up an upper air pattern that's perhaps more in line with the winter of 2013, 2014, which set up this winter pattern very early in the month of December, and it pretty much stayed that way until the middle of March, with just some very minor interruptions in between. It remains to be seen if that's where we're going to be going in the long term with this, but just a little food for thought with regards to his opinions. Pretty smart guy, knows his stuff. So I'm just putting his opinion out there. He may be right, he may be wrong. We're only going to know in the fullness of time. Why don't we take a look at the weather in Europe? Because while the east-based block continues in the Atlantic at the moment, it's created very cold conditions in Europe. You can see this upper air storm sitting in northwestern Germany. The flow aloft is coming straight from the Arctic regions down across England into France and Spain and over to Italy. And of course, once the block begins to shift westward, we're going to see a change in that flow next week as the flow becomes more westerly across the British Isles. So that kind of cuts the cold air off, at least for a while. As we go late in the period, we've got some troughing here in Western Europe that develops, but that Arctic connection gets cut off sometime during early next week once the block begins to shift westward. And as far as the day-to-day weather is concerned, we can take a look at the surface map here, and you can see there's waves of snow going down into Spain and southern France and over into Italy. You've got things fairly quiet in England, but they've got that northerly wind. But now, of course, next week you get that change with the block shifting, and then you start to get low pressure that comes in from the west. So that's going to be more rain than anything else, except perhaps up in northern Scotland. Looks like behind the low, we get into those northerlies, and the models are producing some hefty snows, it seems. I don't know if this is going to hold together in future runs, but it'll be certainly be interesting to watch. Let's punch up the snowfall map. And actually, some areas are shown to do fairly well with the snowfall. These are snowfall amounts, by the way, in centimeters and not inches. Okay, just to be clear, 2.5 centimeters to an inch. So you get into the fuchsia, and then you're talking about, that's where you're talking about 4, 5, 6 inch amounts over a 10-day period. When you get up into the green areas up here, then you're talking 30 centimeters. So we're talking 1 foot plus snows up in parts of Norway and Sweden, and of course as you go up into Russia and then on eastward from there. So pretty interesting weather pattern for Europe. We'll take a look at eastern Canada, see what the snow gods are having for eastern Canada, and the snow here is also in centimeters. So you can see the amounts just western parts of Newfoundland, inland areas of New Brunswick, and on up through Quebec and Labrador. It's pretty much the same story here going forward with snow over the next 10 days. And with respect to the day-to-day weather, we'll put the surface map on. And I think with all this blocking, systems are going to tend to want to go south, so you're going to see perhaps not too much in the way of activity, but a lot's going to depend on what comes out of that trough along the east coast over time. But let me just run this back from the beginning. I'm sorry. Let's start from the beginning. So we do have just a couple of weak weather systems going through this weekend and into next week. along about Wednesday, late Wednesday, you got a weather front approaching, but it actually weakens as it approaches the Canadian Maritimes. Doesn't look like it produces all that much. And then you get low pressure coming up from the south next weekend, and that produces some rain and snow over Newfoundland and parts of Labrador. So everything's pretty much lining up. There really isn't that much change in the overall scheme of things. The teleconnection indices, which, you know, if you give me a second, I'll try and pull them up, but it's just going to take me a minute to get through. It was kind of hairy today with everything going on. I was not, I didn't have a chance to add some of the graphics that I would have liked to have added because of the earthquakes. They sort of had me doing last minute things for the show, so I was just a bit occupied. But let me see if I can do it this way. And so just give me a second, because these teleconnection indices are pretty important in the scheme of things with what's going on, and I think it'll just shed some light into you know, where we're going with the overall pattern. So almost there, folks. I think I have it here. Let's see. Okay, there it is. Almost there. We have it. And there you go. So these are the teleconnection indices from the today's models, and the thing that stands out to me is this PNA, this Pacific North America Index. And to review, we talked about this last night. The Pacific North America Index basically is an index that measures the magnitude of change of pressure in the Pacific Northwest and in the Northeast Pacific. And when this number is positive, usually they run inside the index from a value of plus 200 to minus 200. When it is plus 200, it indicates a strong ridge in the west. When it's plus 400, as it's shown and forecast to stay there almost through the middle of the month until it drops off a little bit, but still strongly positive, that's kind of off the wall. That is a very, very powerful ridge. And it would explain the fact that we've got that long jet that comes all the way from the Arctic region all the way down into the eastern part of the United States. So that would argue that we could see some rather cold Arctic air coming down, certainly for this time of year, when we really get deep into that long wave trough pattern that's going to get established. The North Atlantic Oscillation, or NAO, measures blocking, and it measures the pressure changes, the magnitude of pressure changes in the North Atlantic. When that value is negative, that means that the pressures in the North Atlantic are higher. And one of the things that I want to pay attention to is when you get the North Atlantic Oscillation trending from a strong negative value, which is where it is now, up toward the neutral line, which is where it will be a week from now. If you couple that with that strong PNA, that might be a bit of a storm signal. Now, when I say a storm, I don't necessarily mean something blockbuster. It may just be something that produces a minor to moderate precipitation event, but it would be important if we do get something even minor or moderate in nature, because of the fact that we're going to have all this cold air around. The other index, by the way, is also, I think it's more important than the NAO, and that's the EPO, the East Pacific Oscillation, which is basically the NAO in the East Pacific. And when this is negative, coupled with that strong PNA, you can have very cold conditions in the eastern part of the United States, and you'll notice that index gets strongly negative on December 6th, 7th, and 8th, and kind of starts to trend up toward the neutral line back around December 14th. So the two, in order, the PNA and EPO together, I think, are the most important. So you want the positive PNA, the negative EPO, and the NAO. You know, when it's negative with those other two, it can create very wintry conditions. But if you are a cold weather snow lover, you don't necessarily have to have the NAO in a negative position. So these teleconnections continue to remain very consistent, even if the models themselves are showing some day-to-day or run-to-run inconsistency. Those teleconnections have been pretty much solid, spot on for the last 5 or 6 days. They haven't really wavered very much. So that kind of tells me that we're going to be heading into the direction that we've been indicating. And also the fact that I should point out too, the last 3 or 4 runs of the models inside the day 7 time frame, or even out to day 8, have suddenly gotten very consistent. After so many days of seeing them flip from one way or another because they can't handle the block very well, it suddenly has developed this sense of consistency. So I think my confidence level in all of this happening is now rather high, I would say. All right. Hello to everybody on board. We've got a lot of folks here typing away. Mirtha Gunter is here, and hi to you. And this is usually the time of year we get into this the argument over where winter begins. So this is how I look at it. Winter begins, in my mind, you have the 3 coldest months of the year. This is how I look at it. So I basically look at it from December 1st to March 1st. That to me comprises the winter season. Those are the 3 statistically coldest months in terms of temperatures. So I kind of go with that. I consider March a spring month because once we get into the very beginning of March, temperatures are beginning to rise the average temperatures are beginning to rise rather quickly. So March to me is a spring month because of the accelerating the accelerating temperatures. The normals are going up 1 degree every 3 or 4 days. We're still seeing falling temperatures here during the month of December at a fairly fast clip, but that clip slows down as we get toward the end of the month. Doesn't really hit bottom until the last week of January, first week of February, and then it swings and begins a slow uptrend through the month of February. Astronomical winter, when the sun reaches the direct rays of the sun are down at the Tropic of Capricorn in the southern hemisphere, and that doesn't happen until December 21st. And from that point, the days are actually getting longer, so the sun doesn't make it back up to the equator with the direct rays until March 20th, 21st. So astronomical winter and meteorological winter are 2 different things. And by the way, seasons don't pay attention to these things. And when I say that, what I mean is that we've had early snows outside of what is considered winter. We've had late snows outside what is considered winter and in the spring. So those things are going to happen when they're going to happen. Paul Sack, you felt the earthquake, I see. Adam Fitz, did you feel the earthquake? Did anybody else feel the earthquake? Just put it up on the chat. And I'm running through to see your questions. Chris Alley, good to see you here, Chris. Hope you're feeling well. Nice to see you all as always on the live stream. Dio's here. Tom Adams, White Christmas north of shore of Boston. Well, we got this pattern change coming, and it looks like this winter type pattern that's setting up is going to last for a while. So, hey, you certainly have a better shot with this pattern than you would without it. I know that's not exactly the answer you might be looking for, but I couldn't tell you at this point whether there's going to be snow on the ground for Christmas. Remember, all of this could happen, and we could still wind up being storm-free, cold, and dry. Let's see. I did not feel the earthquake, by the way, here. So to Fallen Angels' question, the U.S. Geological Survey says it was a 4.1. And yes, 99 Wolves, the 5.4 Tonga, 6.4 earthquake in the middle of the Atlantic. I was seeing some things that, that might have kind of set the whole thing off, but I'm still, kind of digging through some information with regards to this. Didn't expect to have an earthquake in Delaware today, that's for sure. Let's see. Can we talk about Eurasia snowfall now and how it relates to extreme winter weather moving to mid-latitudes? Okay, well, Thomas, as far as the Siberian snow cover is concerned, that index is relevant only during the month of October. It's the rate of snow growth in the month of October that Dr. Cohen, in his research, has determined as what is important. I don't know what the relationship is between the increasing snow cover across Eurasia now and how that impacts the winter weather going forward. The depth of the snow is not important. It's the rate of growth of that snow cover. And, I haven't seen the snow cover map recently of Siberia, of Eurasia, but I imagine that, much of Eurasia has got to be covered in snow. I certainly would think that being a cold air source region is not going to hurt chances, but a lot depends on the upper air. Cash 082, thank you so much for the super chat hit. I'm going to get myself a cup of coffee right after I'm done with my 7 o'clock newscast. Thank you very much for that. I really appreciate it that you hit the super chat. Brandon, let's see. This winter certainly feels like it's going to be different than the past two. I agree. I mean, I kind of sensed this whole month in November, at least here where I am, where temperatures actually averaged a little bit below normal during the month of November. And I've been arguing that the atmosphere, to me, seems to be undergoing this sort of great normalization process. Maybe what the hurricane season accomplished was that it, basically rid the atmosphere of all the excess heat that we built up from the El Nino 2 years ago, and we probably worked some of that off last year. And now we worked maybe the hurricane season this year, worked the rest of that heat off. I mean, it's just just a guess and an observation on my part. I don't have any research that proves that, but hey, might not be far off the truth. Somebody maybe will take that as an idea and run with it. But yes, I agree. And based on what Dr. Cohen says, this matches up with the winter. This may match up better with the winter of 13-14, which was a long duration winter. And by the way, was a winter without significant blocking once the pattern got established. There was not a lot. The NAO was not really very active that winter, and we still managed to do rather well with snow. The GFS, again, I'm still kind of looking at the end of next week and next weekend in terms of a signal. I want to see what the runs do going forward, and I'm thinking we're probably not going to see today's day run model showed a system, that wave that I showed you earlier, moving up the East Coast. The European looked more like the very most recent GFS, which I showed you, where the wave stays offshore. But yesterday, the European looked like today's GFS. So, I think we're going to see some back and forth here. Again, depending on the structure of that trough and what kind of shortwave troughs are embedded in there that we're not seeing, that the models are not going to see until we get a little bit closer to the short range. Joe, what are the chances of me doing a tour of the weather center? If you remember, I'm very interested in being a meteorologist. Okay, just Zach. You know what? Why don't you just message me on Facebook and we'll talk about it some more. Let me see we'll have to see what's going on. But just send me a message on Facebook and we can go on with this. Michael Greco, good to see you here. Listen, if this pattern establishes itself, I think we may see some snow in the next couple of weeks. I can't point to anything specific at this point, but if it's going to snow, if you want snow, at the very least you're going to have the cold weather pattern set in there. I gotta think that it's strong enough that you can. The pattern here, this cold weather pattern, that something's going to happen somewhere. I kind of be shocked if it didn't. you don't have Facebook. Well, you know, you can also message me here on YouTube. I think you can gain access to send me a message, and then we can sort of take it from there. Jason Smith, the UK. So early winter is a promising scene for us cold weather lovers. Yeah, at least for now, until early next week, when you're going to see the pattern switch a little bit when that block pulls out. And as far as my cat is concerned, he's kind of going back and forth. He was a little better yesterday. He was not too good this morning, but then I understand this afternoon he was doing better. Thank you very, very much for asking. I really appreciate that. And I'll let you guys know how he is tomorrow when I get home tonight. Hopefully he's going to continue to improve. It's just been a very, very rough couple of weeks between my dog passing and my cat. And thank you again, those of you, you've expressed sympathy, and I really appreciate it very much. Pandaz, you want that 10 below wind chill and getting snow for Ohio. Well, the pattern will be right for you if as well, that something could happen somewhere along the line. Let's see. Brandon says, first live chat here. Been watching my videos for a while. Live on the coast of New Jersey near Toms River. Was disappointed with storms going inland last year. Yeah, that was, if you were just north of you and northwest of you, there was much more snow. That last year was the first time in a long time where there was more snow in inland areas of our area, New Jersey to southern New England, where the further north and west you went, the more snow you had. We've had a number of winters in the last 15 or 16 years where the coast got the most. So that was a rare change last in this cycle, where we've seen the north and west areas getting the more snow than the coastal areas. But you know what? It might go back the other way this year. I'm just giving another thank you to Cash 082 for hitting super chat again. Thank you very much. Ricky Della Riva, the pattern is good for the east but bad for the west in Colorado with their ski resorts virtually getting no snow. You're going into a big ridge position with that strong positive Pacific North America index going up to plus 400. Yeah, that is going to be warm in the west, but you know what? It's been kind of busy for the last month and a half across much of the Intermountain West, so you're getting a bit of a break here. Now, maybe it'll flip back after a couple of weeks. I don't know. That's going to be interesting to see if that is the case, but it seems like it wants to go to the east this year as opposed to the last two winters where it's been out in the west. All right, folks, got to call it a night here. We'll keep you updated. There's posts on the website. There's posts on my Facebook page. You can access me on Twitter. All those links are on my YouTube channel page. If you go to the top of the page where there's that banner picture, if you look in the lower corner, you'll see links to my Facebook, my YouTube, my Google+, my Twitter, and my website. And you can also check out the Joe Stradamus store if you'd like. And you've got some stuff you want to get for Christmas, be it a Santa Claus Joe Stradamus Jolly Christmas mug or other mugs that mark some weather events of the past. You can take a look at those, and I would appreciate it very much. Thank you. It's a way you could support my channel and support what I'm doing, because I want to take this up to the next level in the next year or two. So we'll hope we get there. I saw a question on blocking. Pandas, doesn't blocking mean clippers and cold? It can, Pandas. It depends on how strong the blocking is. You know, you have if you could have blocking that's so strong that everything winds up getting suppressed to the south and east. So a lot depends on that. A lot depends on how strong the ridge is in the west. And you could have clippers, a pattern with clippers, but you know, you can get them where if you get them with a strong ridge in the west, those troughs as they swing down and around can sharpen up and intensify, and you can get them to develop into nice little lows with good solid overrunning. That happened a lot during the winter of 13-14, and in fact, one of the signatures about that winter and the winter that followed, 14-15, was that every time it snowed, at least here where I am in the southeastern New York, southern New England area, the temperatures for every snow event were down in the teens, and in a couple of cases down in the low teens to near 10 above. That is unusual here. Most of the time when it snows, you've got temperatures basically between 20 and 30, particularly between middle and upper 20s. But we had event after event after event with temperatures that were down in the teens, and that was actually pretty interesting to see meteorologically, to have that air so cold. And yet at the same time we were able to generate quite a bit of snow, albeit the high ratio fluff type snows, which are very, very powdery. All right, folks, have a great rest of your Thursday. Be well and be safe, and we'll talk to you tomorrow when we'll update you all the latest on the return of winter time into the eastern part of the United States.